everybody. I want to welcome you to another Cape Conversations. I'm Melinda Gallant, and we've got a great show today. Yes, with one of our state senators who oversees all of Falmouth, clear up to Pembroke. So come along, let's have another Cape Conversations. Hi, everybody. I'm Melinda Gallant, and I am so excited to have here in the studio with me Dylan Fernandes, our state senator, who's brought through all these bills. He's doing a great job. He's young, he's vital, he's ready to rock and roll.
Wow.
Dylan,
Wow.
welcome.
Thank you so much. What an intro.
Well, I'm so excited you're here. I really am.
Yeah.
It's so
but
nice.
here.
Well, you know what? You're youthful, you're young, you're getting things done. How many bills have you put forth?
This session, I think we're at 48 right now. So
Cool
quite a few
thing.
bills, a lot going on, but a lot of needs in our district. So there's a lot.
Sure.
But they range from housing to environmental to water quality to tourism, a whole lot of good stuff there. And so you have 2 weeks at the beginning of session to file bills, and we filed 48 and that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good.
Doing a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what you're there for.
Absolutely. We're here to serve. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. Look, there's a lot of challenges right now for people on the Cape and across. I represent all the way, Falmouth, all the way up to Pembroke. This kind of long line.
It's a long
And,
distance.
it's a big distance, and
No two things are alike.
no two things are alike, but they're actually pretty similar. So
Huh?
they're just kind of gradients of challenges, but
Yeah.
the challenges are pretty similar.
Mhm.
Affordability is kind of the biggest issue.
Housing, yeah.
I mean, here on the Cape, here in Sandwich, it's almost impossible to be able to afford a home. And oops, sorry, I touched the mic. People in my generation, they're leaving in droves because there's no chance they could find a foothold here. So cost of housing, cost of childcare, cost of living, that's a big issue here, but it's a big issue in every part of the district, north to south. And then, of course, huge environmental challenges. We're right on the ocean. We're seaside communities. So everywhere is dealing with, increased storms, higher sea level rise, kind of the impacts of what that's going to be in the future, how that's going to, impact the local infrastructure. And so these are all challenges that every town is facing. But some places are a little more expensive than others, and the Cape side is crazy expensive.
Well, the median price, and I just saw this figure, is $669,000 in Sandwich.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
when we moved here 40 some years ago,
Don't even
you could buy a really nice house for 115. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be,
Yeah.
3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, nice home.
Yeah.
For under 100,000, you could get a small home.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. How do kids stay here? I've got, we moved here with 3 kids. I only have one that stayed, and he owns the Pickle Jar Kitchen.
Yeah.
that you've
Oh,
been
it's so
to.
good.
Yeah.
So yummy.
Thank you for
Check
that
it out.
indoor-
Check out Pickle Jar.
Thank you. That said, um, that said, his boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
They both live at home.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get out of the house? I mean, trust me, they both want house,
Yeah.
but it's right now they've got plenty of room and it's not an issue. But you can't start a family, get married, start a family unless you have, you're gonna be able to buy a home or at least rent someplace affordable. And there's nothing even affordable to rent right at
Yeah.
the moment.
Yeah. It's a real challenge. And so, look, I think if we don't address it, it's going to erode our communities far faster than the ocean will. And so there's a lot we have to do around this.
Sure.
And it's not just affordability, quality of life, really American dream issue. It's also economic. It's also a workforce issue. We need to be able to sustain something of a workforce here.
Right.
And right now, and this has happened rapidly, 50% of the workers who work on the Cape come over the bridge every morning and leave every afternoon. And so that's something that's very different from my childhood growing up
Sure.
on the Cape.
Sure.
So we've done some big things around this. There's more to do. One of the biggest things we did was around changing how you can change, how towns can change zoning
Mhm.
for housing. And so it used to be
For
a
the ADU?
AD I'll get to ADUs in a second,
Okay.
but that's a big thing, and that's zoning related. But this is even before we did the big housing bill last session. We allowed for municipalities to change zoning at town meeting with a simple 50% majority. It used to be a 2/3 majority, which is like no one, 2/3 of people can agree on anything these days.
In
So
Massachusetts?
yeah, really anywhere. So that was a big change on freeing up or just democratizing zoning in a way that, now you can rezone areas that make sense for housing for higher density that have commercial use kind of in downtown areas in a more easy way than was done before. And you're already seeing towns adopt this
Mhm.
and that leading to more housing production in downtown areas where they're not taking down trees. There's already public infrastructure, places that make sense. And then on top, and then, fast forward to last session, we passed the largest housing bill ever in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
putting a ton of money into our different housing production programs in the state that
Mhm.
towns and developers can apply for to build housing. And then we did some zoning pieces too. So now there's ADUs, accessory dwelling units by right, kind of these in-law granny flats, whatever. They have a million names. But essentially, it's up to 900 square feet. You can build an accessory dwelling unit by right now. And that's true for every single one of the 351 cities and towns.
That's great.
And Massachusetts is great. And a lot of towns on the Cape had passed some ADU bylaw,
Right.
but a lot of them were actually quite onerous. And so they passed these bylaws. Fast forward a couple of years, you'd have like 3, 4
Yeah.
ADUs in the entire town
Right.
being built, and they were quite expensive. And so our hope is that because other states have done this, and we look to them as a model, but our hope is that since the regulations will be standard statewide, you really can have developers that can develop kind of prefab models, get economies of
Sure.
scale behind them
Right.
to the point where you should be able to drop a 900 or under square foot home on your property for a significantly reduced cost than doing kind of a boutique build, which are custom build, which are
Right.
quite expensive. And
Sure.
that's the type of housing that's important for doing, a starter home for
Mhm.
someone, for your, the kids living out of the home. That's a nice place. Or really importantly for seniors who have a big home but want to downsize.
Right.
There's a lot of seniors in our community that are looking to do that, but can't find a place on the Cape as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's and well, and on the Cape, I mean, your constituency in Sandwich in
Hmm.
particular is old.
Hmm.
They're way I mean, they're over 55.
Yeah.
Most of them are retired. If anybody's out there listening to me and says, "Oh my god, she's going to say it," mostly they were middle management, upper management. Some were, presidents and whatever, but they moved to Sandwich because it was close to the bridge,
Hmm.
so they bought that second home and now they've moved into it. Um, and that's a real problem now because of housing prices. They're saying, "Oh, I wanna downsize. I wanna get out of this house that I bought as my second home, and now I wanna retire to a condo,"
Hmm.
and everything is just exploded. And also with, Airbnbs, are
Yeah.
just crazy here.
Yeah, Airbnb is a real issue, and that's why actually when we were doing the housing bill, when we were doing this ADU bylaw, I
Mhm.
pushed for it and I filed an amendment to restrict it so that it couldn't be used just for short-term rentals or Airbnb. Unfortunately, it didn't go through because although that would make sense for the Cape, might not make sense for like Worcester,
Right,
Box. There's
right.
a lot of towns in our
Yeah.
Commonwealth. But we left in the ability for local municipalities, town of Sandwich,
Right.
any town on the Cape,
Could
to go in and further restrict. And I think that makes sense to do, whether it's, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. I think there's some sort of piece where these are not just turning into Airbnbs. We don't need more Airbnbs. Airbnbs are, in my view, they're kind of eroding our communities here.
I
And
agree with you
I
100%.
and I think, but I do think that, there's some that make sense for, especially I think owner occupied probably makes
Sure.
a lot of sense. We've always been a community that rents out where people rent out their home for part of the year.
Cottages, all that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think some of that makes sense, but kind of the big business of it, owning many different homes around it might be a bit of an issue. And you know, there are a lot of models out there that towns can look
Right.
at to kind of restrict or make it more fit the community fabric.
Right. Well, that's a wonderful thing then if it's up to each individual community because I agree with you. It's the sense of community you lose. I have no problems with Airbnbs.
Yeah.
In fact, when my husband and I travel,
Oh, they're
we
great.
go to
Yeah.
they're wonderful. And other communities, sometimes like in Vermont, they have real strict if you
Hmm.
buy a second home, you better be living in it for 9 months of the
Right.
year. Or they tax you to pieces
Hmm.
in Arizona if you rent an
Yeah.
Airbnb.
Yeah.
So those are things that go back into the community, but what you do lose is a sense of community,
Yeah.
because they don't care that the local art gallery just put in a new show. They don't care.
Right.
They wanna go to the beach, right? They're here visiting, they
Mhm.
wanna have fun.
Yeah.
So they wanna go to in here in Sandwich, you wanna go to Tree House,
Yeah.
right? Get that pizza and a couple of
I
beers.
need to go. I need to go. I
It's
am
a
it's
fabulous
really it's like
place.
high up on my list.
It's
Yeah.
fab I had not been till the chamber did an event there, but
Yeah.
I only live 3 blocks from it, so that's how bad I am. All my kids have been there though, even the one in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
But, that said, I I think you're right. They do take away from a sense of community, and I don't, begrudge the owners that at all. They're making
Mhm.
money, and that's terrific. I'm all about commerce, but, you do need to figure out how to make sure that they still either pay
Mhm.
to play or they learn about the sense of community.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah. And we also did a piece in the housing bill, called a seasonal communities designation.
Mhm.
And this is for communities that, really the Cape and Western Mass, like
Sure.
communities that have a lot of seasonal workforce. And it's been really challenging for our towns here to
Oh,
be able to have a workforce, be able to
right.
find, housing for teachers and firefighters and police officers. And a lot of jobs are vacant in our towns across the Cape Islands because of this. And so, one piece is around the seasonal communities designation is that if your community is designated, the town can then use funds to directly pay for housing for their employees. And that's a really
That's
big piece. Creating housing for employees, affordable housing. Usually, you'd have to open that up for everyone
Yep.
in the state. But now, if you have this designation, you can have housing directly for your
That's
employees, which is, yeah, that's a big thing. And that helps with the
sure.
sustainability of our communities too.
So you're not just working on housing, you're working on other things too. So you mentioned climate change. You mentioned, we put in our brand new boardwalk. I presume
Yeah.
you saw that. You've
Yeah.
seen that.
Oh, it's lovely.
It is. I hate it now because it's the number one place to visit when you come over the bridge, and you
Yeah.
can't find a place to park.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, to take a walk on it, unless you get up at 5 in the morning. But also, I mean, it's a serious issue. It's an issue in this town
Yeah.
because of our sand was going away, and they keep putting sand on thanks to the state, but,
Mhm.
I mean, how many times do you do that? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and that's something
Forever, I
worth
guess.
looking at. No, I
Yeah.
don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, well, it depends. It depends. So one of the things we did was, we passed this. It's called the MVP program,
Mhm.
Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness program, and that's a grant program through the state that says that every town can go out and get funds to create an assessment plan of how vulnerable their town is,
Uh-huh.
and take a look at different levels of projected sea level rise, different kind of storm surge projections, and see what parts of their town uh, are going to exist in the next 20, 50, a
But
100
you worry
years.
about Provincetown. That's
Uh,
not your worry right at
yeah.
the moment.
Well, it's a whole, I
It's
mean,
the whole issue.
but you're sandwich, I'm sure. There's places here in 50
Oh, yeah.
years that aren't going to exist. My I from Falmouth. I have a home in Woods Hole. Um, the Woods Hole drawbridge. If people are familiar with that,
Yeah, yeah.
first thing to go in the
Yeah.
town of Falmouth, as an example. And so, there are this is used this planning is used to assess which places make sense to
Uh-huh.
spend money
Yeah.
on hardening or making resilient, and which places you're just going to lose. So it doesn't make sense to continue pouring millions or however much money into something if in 20 years it's just going to be gone anyway.
Right.
And so that's really important for making good decisions so that you're not wasting taxpayer dollars and that you're spending money in places that it's efficient to spend the money so that you're
Sure.
protecting those places. And uh, we have an environmental bond bill coming up this session. I'm vice chair of the environmental committee in the Senate, and this is going to be a place where we're putting a lot more money into this program to help towns be able to, you know, be more resilient. And one part of this too is nature-based solutions. So a lot of river restorations has been really
Mhm.
important to allow, and estuary restorations and the like is
Sure.
really important because that's kind of the first line of defense for rising sea level to make it, to have the water flow into estuaries or rivers
Right.
in ways that it's not flowing into people's homes
Right.
is like that is the first really important step of this. And so we're going to be putting a lot more money into it. But the sad reality is no matter what, there's going to be some places on the Cape and Islands
That won't be here.
won't be here. And that's going to be really tough psychologically for people. And I think, those conversations are important to start having now so that people can really plan
Well,
for it.
there are little islands all over the world that have totally disappeared that had people living on them,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and because of this, and it's now just hitting us,
Yeah.
if you think about it that way.
And
Yeah.
erosion happens, right? We're not, this isn't a new
Nope.
concept to us, but with climate change, we know that, storms are a lot more
Sure.
intense.
Yeah.
And we know that from we're lucky to have the biggest ocean research institutions in the world right here in my Senate district,
Right.
on the Cape. And,
Right.
we know from them and scientists all over the place that, the seas are also rising. And so that confluence is going to cause changes more rapidly than we've seen in
Right.
the past.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, um, at least you are aware, and your fellow Senate people are aware that this is happening. There aren't too many deniers, I don't think, in the Senate about things like oceans rising, I wouldn't think, at this point in time.
No, no,
We're
it's
fortunate we
yeah,
haven't had a large hurricane, that's for sure.
yeah,
I mean, since Hurricane Bob, we haven't really had anything, a
that's
couple of
right.
big nor'easters, but,
Yeah,
that'll be the time to tell what really happens here when we get one, and eventually my husband every year says, "This is the year, we're gonna get another one."
yeah.
So, let's hope we don't, but
I know. I
for
know.
sure.
Yeah, Bob was the last massive one,
Yeah,
but it could happen anytime. We've been lucky.
we've
We've
been
been
lucky.
pretty lucky. Sandy just missed us, right?
Yeah,
But that was devastating. New York's
uh,
still recovering in some
well,
places from
look at
Sandy.
North Carolina
Yeah,
from that one. I didn't even know
yeah,
the name of that one.
yeah.
Um, so you're working on climate change and housing, and you're also working on health. What else are you working on?
I mean, so many different things. I think one piece we're taking a look at is around economic development and
Mhm.
how do we kind of grow and sustain the economy here. And one thing the state I think does really poorly is actually support tourism. So if you compare
I
us to,
agree.
yeah, we do a terrible job. We really do. The
I
Massachusetts,
10
it's
years on the, Cape Cod Chamber Board.
yeah,
I agree with
yeah. The
you.
state does a terrible job of
And arts.
supporting.
I mean, they love the
Yeah.
arts, but they don't wanna fund the
Yeah.
arts.
Yeah, yeah, and arts and tourism overlap, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there yeah.
absolutely.
Um, compared to a New York or a Colorado or a Florida, we don't spend nearly as much, to attract people here,
Mhm.
but we have so much to offer, whether it's we're it's the 250th anniversary of the revolution, right? Like, we literally started this country, we have
Oh,
some of
a lot of it happened right here on this little spit of land.
yeah, we have the richest history of any
Right,
state in the nation.
right.
And then we have, I believe the most beautiful place in the world right here on, the Cape and South Shore. So, we need to do a better job of attracting people here. This is other people's money from other states, other countries. that we can be using to help fuel our economy and also help, with tax revenue for the towns to
Sure.
help with these issues of wastewater, housing,
Sure.
and the like. And so I have legislation that would peel off a part of the short-term rental tax that
Mhm.
goes to the state. It's not new tax; just takes a piece of
Yeah.
what already just goes back to the state coffers and says
Mhm.
that this should be designated
Yeah.
for tourism, because that also helps drive, what drives people to these hotels and motels and Airbnbs is tourism to begin with. So it makes sense. And I think we can, and I think we're going to look at other ways to do it too. The state does a lot around supporting biotech and does a lot around climate tech,
Right.
and those are shiny things, but I think it makes a lot of sense to be supporting people who are who are us, right? Who work in the restaurant industry, who work
Right.
in the hospitality industry. This is a really important industry here in
Sure is.
Massachusetts. It's central to us on the Cape and Islands and the South Shore. And I don't think it gets the attention it deserves, and so we're gonna fight for it.
Well, as I said, I was on the board of the Cape Cod Chamber a long time,
Yeah.
and, what I always was wondering, we know after being there for so long that the majority of our tourists, our visitors, as they like to be
Mhm.
called, instead of tourists, visitors.
Yeah.
The visitors come from as far away as Canada.
Mhm.
Well, gonna check those off right now, probably. But they also come within the East Coast states.
Mhm.
So Delaware, is the majority, Connecticut, New York, Western New York in. Um, and that's where money is spent, to try to entice them to come
Mhm.
here. Of course, they're all advertising here to go there.
Yeah.
So if is the Office of Travel and Tourism, is it still going strong and pushing forward, to get their thoughts across on where all this should go and how it should go?
Yeah, they push for it and they have their own marketing plans, but then
Yeah.
they also give money down to the regional
Right.
tourism councils, and they kind of do their own analysis
Mhm.
too. For instance, in Plymouth, they do a lot of marketing in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania
Right, of
because they've
course.
seen that a lot of
Yeah.
their tourism, the folks there really they have a somehow some large connection between the two. Maybe they both like American history,
Well,
and
I
so
think that's it,
the good people of Philadelphia, want to visit, the Mayflower,
not The
so
Rock.
yeah,
The
well,
Rock.
not The
Of
Rock,
course, The Rock
yeah.
is such a joke now that it's almost
I kind of love The Rock.
well, it's a niche now.
Yeah,
Did you see The Rock? Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, and it's a beautiful, I don't know, what do you call
Surroundings,
that?
yes.
Like, it looks like the Parthenon or
I
something, but yeah.
Coliseum.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think each place has, tourists that they can then target based on,
Yeah,
and there's so much data now,
yeah,
right? Credit card data, hotel data, all these different types of data that you can use to actually really find out who who from which place. Is almost creepy in a way what
yeah.
some of the
Oh, no,
the
they
things
say
you
it
can get
yeah,
from people, different companies out there, to figure out who you should be marketing to. And I think that's probably on a case by case basis depending on the region, because the people who go out to the Berkshires, probably some overlap to here, but different. And so I think you
right.
want to be as targeted as you can in this.
Right. Well, and, the idea that offices of travel and tourism gets more money means they can spend more money in the visitors areas
Mhm.
such as Cape Cod and
Yeah.
what have you. Sandwich, I laugh, we're the QR code town. Everything has a QR code
Mhm.
on it.
Yeah.
We take a picture of that QR, we'll get you somewhere where you wanna go.
Yeah.
It's got a QR code. And they're doing a yeoman's job, at letting people know what's here. Our
Mm.
problem in Sandwich is we don't have a lot of commercial, and we don't have really a lot of beds.
Yeah.
We don't have large hotels here. We have cottages
Mhm.
and we have a few really very nice hotels and then a few motels.
Yeah.
So it's a little more difficult here than it is, for instance, in Falmouth, you
Yeah.
know?
And it's worthwhile developing that though,
Yeah.
so, to pick on Falmouth, right? Like you go through downtown Falmouth, it's very
Mhm.
pretty.
Yeah.
And then as the farther up you go, it just turns into a parking lot.
I know.
And it's actually quite hideous. And
But
so,
you know what it is? Strip malls.
yeah,
That's
it's a
just
strip malls. It's just got, this is my hometown. I'm allowed to make fun of it. Um, uh, but the town of Falmouth, to their credit, has said, okay, let's redevelop this area.
right.
Let's rezone it. And so through that 50% zoning that we passed through the legislature, we
Mhm.
made it easier for the town to rezone. So now this massive parking lot uh, that's in front of a strip mall is being turned into kind of a mixed use development
Yeah.
where you have commercial
Yeah.
on the bottom, and then you have affordable housing on top, and that's exactly the type of stuff
That's
we
how they
should
used
be
to build
building.
towns.
That's how towns, that
That's
needs
how they
to,
used to be built.
yeah, and that's
That's Buff Chase. The
no,
new urbanism.
yeah.
It's all about that.
Well, that's you couldn't build. We need to get back to our roots here.
Yeah.
I mean, we really do,
Yeah.
and get back to our cultural identity. And so it's worth the town of Sandwich taking a look at some of these things
Yeah.
around rezoning, because the most popular places on the Cape and Islands, uh, the oldest places on the Cape and Islands,
Mhm.
you couldn't build them today
Yeah.
because of zoning. So you look at like downtown Nantucket,
Right.
probably the most iconic place in our entire
And you
region.
can't.
It's all mixed use,
Right.
it's all higher density, it's all in a downtown area, and it's beautiful. You look at, Mashpee Commons, it's
I know,
similar
boy,
similar
they're still
aesthetic.
fighting the battle.
Yeah. Well, and then you look at, downtown Falmouth, same downtown Provincetown, right?
Right.
These kind of iconic areas that are historic, that actually are like the most kind of local, the most part of our fabric of
Right.
our community, almost impossible to build. And so we've been in the legislature, we've been encouraging municipalities to do that and take a
Right.
look at it and get back to our roots on how towns are
Sure.
supposed to be built and
Sure.
what people really really like, what people are attracted to, and ultimately too, it's important that towns have a decent amount of commercial,
Sure. It
because
helps the tax base.
yeah, I know, because you're like, because everyone at home
Trust me, I
is
know.
going to be paying higher taxes. And
Right.
a lot of people here, getting back to the demographics, a lot of people here are on fixed incomes,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so you want to be able to alleviate
Right.
people's residential taxes.
Right.
The best way to do that is, increase your commercial tax base.
Right.
Best way to do that is around looking at some of these zoning issues.
Right. Right. You have been a delight, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. This has
Come
been a
back
delight.
again.
I love that.
All right.
Yeah.
Let us know what you're doing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, and people, can I say, people can reach out to us too,
Okay.
because we're here to serve. We're here to help.
Okay.
We represent, you people.
And you actually
So
get back to them.
we
Yes.
do. Yeah.
All
Just
right.
Dylan.Fernandes at masenate.gov. Shoot me a note, and we're happy to help with anything.
All right. Great. I'll keep that in mind. They'll keep it in mind out there too.
Good.
So thank you again,
Good.
Dylan. It's been a delight.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Dylan Fernandes, state senator. He answered a lot of questions. They're doing a lot of stuff up in the state house, and it's up to you to pay attention and get in contact with him if you have a question. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer it. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time on another Cape Conversations.